Hey there, welcome back. Tonight, we were taking a quiet walk into a place that still breathes beneath the jungle, a world carved in stone and wrapped in vines. By watching this video, you will learn what the Maya civilization truly felt like, not as a list of dates or ruins, but as a living, breathing rhythm, the smell of damp earth, the warmth of carved limestone, the echo of footsteps between temples built for gods that once ruled the sky. Before we begin, a small favor. If you enjoy these calm journeys through forgotten corners of history, consider subscribing, only if it helps you drift peacefully into more stories like this. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I like imagining this invisible web of listeners scattered across the world, falling asleep to the same story under different skies. Now, take a slow breath. The air is heavy here, thick with humidity and secrets. A single drop of rain slides down a broad green leaf and falls to the ground with the softest sound you can imagine. Beneath that layer of earth, a city sleeps. A whole world, once alive with color, music, and ritual, now buried under centuries of roots. The Maya weren't a single kingdom. They were a constellation, dozens of city-states shining and fading across what is now Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. Each one had its own king, its own gods, its own heartbeat. Yet together they formed something remarkable, a civilization that lasted for over 2,000 years, without ever calling itself an empire. Imagine climbing the steps of a temple in Tikal. The limestone is warm under your bare feet. You reach the top, and for a moment, all you see is green, an endless ocean of trees stretching to every horizon. Somewhere below, children laugh. A priest chants. A conch shell hums in the distance. It's not ruins yet. It's home. The Maya world was built not on metal or horses, but on rhythm, the rhythm of rain and drought, of corn sprouting and dying, of sun and shadow. Their cities rose from that rhythm. Their calendars captured it, and their gods demanded it be honored. Everything, from birth to sacrifice, followed the quiet turning of cycles. They didn't just watch the sky, they lived by it. The sun wasn't a ball of fire, it was a being, making its daily journey across a sky filled with meaning. The stars weren't decoration, they were reminders of ancestors who had once looked down on the living. Even time wasn't a line to the Maya. It was a circle, a spiral that brought everything back again. Life, death, and life again. But every circle has its fragile moments. Even as their cities grew grander and their kings more divine, something subtle began to shift beneath the surface. Like the first creak in a great wooden beam. The soil would dry, the rains would falter, the gods would grow silent. Not yet, though. Not tonight. For now, the jungle is alive with the hum of cicadas and the scent of copal incense. You hear it, don't you? The low beat of a drum carried by the wind, the soft murmur of prayers rising between stone pillars. The Maya believed that sound could bridge worlds, that music itself was a way to speak with the divine. So every ritual, every festival, every sacrifice was a conversation between earth and sky. If you stood among them, you might not understand a word, but you would feel it, that deep, slow pulse that connects everyone, from the farmers in the fields to the kings in their golden headdresses. And that's what makes the Maya so haunting. They weren't just builders of cities, they were keepers of meaning. They shaped time itself, then vanished into it. Centuries later, explorers would stumble upon their temples, swallowed by the jungle, and call them lost. But the truth is quieter. Nothing was lost. It just fell asleep. And tonight, as you listen to the rustle of leaves and the slow breath of the rainforest, you're standing right at the edge of that dream, about to step inside. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen. There it is. The deep, patient heartbeat of the jungle. Not the roar of civilization, but a steady pulse beneath it all. The Maya called this land home, and in return, It tested them every single day. The air here never really cools. It clings to your skin like silk that has been left too long in the rain. Every breath is heavy with moisture, and the faint sweetness of flowers that bloom and die within the same afternoon. The forest isn't quiet. It hums, a layered soundscape of crickets, frogs, and unseen wings brushing against leaves the size of shields. This is the Maya world, the Petén, the lowlands of Central America, an endless stretch of green. There are no mountains to guard it, no wide rivers to carry trade, only limestone ground that swallows every drop of rain and gives nothing back. To survive here meant learning patience and reverence. The Maya carved their world out of this stubborn earth. They didn't have metal tools nor beasts of burden, only stone, wood, and human will. Yet they raised cities so vast that even the sky seemed to rest upon their temples. Every pyramid, every road, every courtyard was wrestled from the hands of a living jungle that never stopped trying to take it all back. It's hard to imagine now, looking at the ruins. But once, these stones were painted bright red, blue, and yellow, colors so vivid they looked alive. The cities glimmered beneath the tropical sun, like scattered jewels in a green sea. You can almost smell the plaster baking in the heat, the sharp tang of sap from freshly cut trees, the smoke of cooking fires winding upward through canopies. The forest and the people were rivals, but also lovers. The Maya didn't try to conquer nature, they negotiated with it. Each harvest, each rainfall was part of a sacred agreement. When they planted corn, Ixim, the body of the gods themselves, they didn't just sow seeds. They performed a ritual to remind the earth why it should still care about humanity. Because here, if you stopped believing, the jungle took notice, and it remembered. Sometimes the rains came too early, sometimes not at all. A good year meant plenty, but a bad one meant empty granaries, restless stomachs, and desperate prayers to Chak, the rain god. When the clouds refused to answer, people would gather in plazas and lift their eyes to the heavens. They didn't beg, they bargained. They offered smoke, music, and sometimes blood, not out of cruelty, but out of fear that the world might forget them. The forest has long memory. You can still sense it in the soil, a blend of fertility and warning. The roots here grow thick and shallow, gripping the earth like fingers afraid to let go. Above them, the canopy stretches tight, blotting out most of the light. Only thin rays break through, like silent shafts of gold dust floating in the green air. It was in this half-light that the Maya found both beauty and danger. Snakes that could kill in a heartbeat, jaguars that moved like smoke, diseases that crept in with the rain. But for every risk, there was reward. Cacao beans for trade, obsidian for tools, feathers so brilliant they seemed to glow in the dark. They didn't just live in the jungle. They lived with it. Their homes were built from its bones, their food from its breath, their gods from its storms. Even death returned to it. When someone passed, they were buried close to home, under the same ground that grew their corn. The earth took back what it had loaned, and life continued its slow spiral. Stand there, in your imagination, on the edge of a Maya field. The air smells of wet soil and wood smoke. A woman hums as she grinds corn on a stone slab, her hands moving in rhythm with generations before her. A child chases a bird across the clearing. Somewhere far off, thunder rolls, low, distant, and promising. To the Maya, that sound was not just weather. It was a god clearing his throat, a reminder that life here was never secure, only borrowed. And as the first raindrops begin to fall, tapping on leaves and roofs like gentle fingers, you can almost feel it, that balance between awe and fear, between creation and collapse. A world so green, it seemed eternal. But eternity, as the Maya would one day learn, is just another kind of illusion. Picture the jungle at dawn. The mist lies low, curling around the roots of giant trees. Parrots scream lazily from somewhere far above. A few pale shafts of light push through the canopy, striking something strange, not stone yet, not nature anymore, but something in between, the beginning of a wall. This is where civilization begins, not with gold or conquest, but with stubborn hands moving mud and stone, trying to make sense of the world. The first Maya settlements were little more than villages of thatched huts, clustered around sacred hills or natural springs. But over generations, those huts became plazas, and those hills became pyramids. A Maya city wasn't simply built, it was grown, like a tree. The earliest cities, such as Nakbe and El Mirador, appeared centuries before Christ, rising slowly out of the swampy lowlands of what is now northern Guatemala. The people had no beasts of burden, no iron chisels, no wheels, and yet they lifted limestone blocks weighing tons, carving and stacking them into terraces that climbed toward the clouds. If you were there, you'd see workers coated in gray dust, their bare feet pressing into clay. The smell of sweat, resin, and crushed stone fills the air. Children carry water in clay pots. Women prepare meals over small fires. Priests walk through the half-finished plazas chanting blessings to the gods of rain and soil. There is no silence here, only the rhythm of creation, hammer, drum, prayer. Every Maya city had a heart. The plaza. This was the open center, the breathing space of the settlement. Around it stood temples, palaces, and ball courts, the architectural language of power and belief. To stand in a plaza was to stand at the axis of the universe. Each side of the city represented a direction, north for ancestors, south for the living, east for birth, west for death. In their design, the Maya didn't separate the sacred from the mundane. Every house, every road, every stairway pointed toward meaning. Even drainage systems and markets were aligned with celestial events. When you walked through a Maya city, you didn't just travel through space. You moved through time, through stories, through the turning of the heavens themselves. Above all, their cities were made for seeing. At the top of a temple, a priest could watch the sun rise exactly between two carved towers on the day of the equinox. To them, this wasn't coincidence. It was proof that the gods were paying attention, that human effort, sweat, and devotion alike could literally move the heavens into harmony. But perfection came at a cost. Building a temple wasn't a weekend project. It could take decades, even generations. Each new ruler added another layer, another staircase, another altar. Cities like Tikal and Calakmul became living records of ambition, layer upon layer of limestone dreams. Beneath every floor was the buried floor of the one before it, like time itself stacked on time. And that's the secret heartbeat of these cities. They were alive. When a king died, his tomb became the foundation for a new shrine. When a temple aged, it wasn't destroyed. It was entombed within a newer one. The Maya didn't erase their past. They built upon it, literally. Every wall carried memory. Every stone whispered names that no one alive could still pronounce. From the distance, it might have looked peaceful, but inside the cities, life was dense, loud, and hot. The smell of roasting maize drifted through narrow alleys. Dogs barked. Musicians played clay flutes that echoed against plaster walls painted in bright pigments. Markets were crowded with traders selling jade beads, obsidian blades, feathers, and salt. Smoke from cooking fires drifted upward, joining incense from the temples. And somewhere above it all, a priest stood at the top of a pyramid, gazing over the rooftops toward the rising sun. He wasn't just admiring the view. He was watching the world unfold exactly as the calendar said it should. Every shadow, every sound, every scent fit into a pattern. The Maya world was built on patterns, cycles within cycles, each one feeding the next. Their architecture was a language for time, and their cities were clocks made of stone. When the solstice sun struck the right wall, the year turned. When the shadow crossed the courtyard, a ritual began. It's tempting to think of these cities as silent ruins, but imagine them as they were. Colors everywhere, sound bouncing from wall to wall, sweat shining on skin, laughter rising from the market square. The air would taste of salt and lime, tinged with the sweetness of cacao and fruit. There were no straight lines, no sterile order, just an organic balance between chaos and grace. Yet beneath all this beauty, a quiet tension grew. Each city wanted to be the heart of the world, the chosen one, the favored child of the gods. Alliances shifted like the wind. Rival kings built higher pyramids, carved grander stelae, and performed bloodier rituals to prove divine favor. The competition wasn't over land or gold, it was over meaning. Still, for centuries, the system worked. Cities rose and fell, but the civilization itself endured. In this green labyrinth of heat and devotion, the Maya found a way to turn survival into something holy. When night came, and the torches flickered in the plazas, the jungle didn't sleep. It simply listened, to the drums, to the chants, to the unending conversation between humanity and the earth that held it. And if you stood there, watching from the edge of the trees, you might have wondered, how long can harmony last when every wall you build must one day crumble back into dust? The Maya never asked that question aloud. They were too busy building the answer. The mist clears as morning rises over a Maya city, and for a moment, the jungle glows. You stand on a plaza of pale limestone, your bare feet cold against the stone. The air smells of dust, resin, and the faint sweetness of flowers that wilt before noon. Around you, temples stretch upward, their staircases steep and shimmering in the new light. It feels less like architecture and more like choreography, a conversation between sunlight and stone. The Maya were not simply builders, they were astronomers with hammers, priests with measuring cords. To them, a city wasn't a collection of buildings, it was a map of the heavens made solid. Every corner, every stairway, every shadow had meaning. They built not only for the eyes of their people, but for the gaze of their gods. The limestone they carved was alive. When freshly cut, it was soft, a creamy, chalky surface that yielded easily under their stone tools. The smell of wet lime hung in the air like smoke. When it dried, it hardened to a blinding white, as if it had trapped sunlight inside. Workers would polish it smooth, then coat it in paint, red for power, blue for sky, green for life. Imagine it, entire cities shining like jewels under the tropical sun. Nothing about this world was gray. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the rhythm of construction, the thud of stone on stone, the breath of laborers hauling blocks without beasts or wheels, the soft chant of a priest marking time in sacred numbers. Maya architecture wasn't random, it was numeric poetry. Many temples were built in steps that matched the 260-day sacred calendar. Some staircases had exactly 91 steps on each side, plus one final platform at the top. 365, one for every day of the solar year. Their cities were calendars you could walk through. Now look up. At the top of a pyramid, a small structure, the temple house, catches the first rays of the sun. It isn't centered by accident. Twice a year, on the equinox, the light falls through a narrow doorway, illuminating the inner chamber for just a few moments. The people below cheer softly because the universe has kept its promise. The gods are still watching. The world is still aligned. It's hard not to feel awe at that precision. Without telescopes, without compasses, they could read the sky like scripture. They tracked Venus across the horizon for years, predicting its rising and disappearance. They timed the solstices, measured the moon's shadow, and even calculated eclipses centuries before they happened. Each building was a record of this cosmic intimacy. The Maya didn't look at the stars for curiosity's sake. They looked because the fate of their world depended on keeping rhythm with them. But this harmony came with cost. The limestone they used had to be burned in great kilns to make plaster, and for that they needed wood. Forest after forest was cut and carried away, leaving the edges of the cities bare and quiet. Smoke rose from the kilns at night, red and constant, like small volcanoes. The same fires that made beauty also sowed the seeds of ruin. The Maya didn't know it yet, but the forests they fed to their temples would one day vanish, and with them the rains they prayed for. Still, during their golden centuries, the cities flourished. Walk with me now through Tikal. The plaza stretches wide, flanked by twin pyramids that face one another across a courtyard of trampled earth. The air shimmers with heat. A woman balances a clay pot on her head as she crosses the square. Musicians play reed flutes that echo softly against the walls. Children chase each other between pillars carved with gods, kings, and jaguars. Life is dense, colorful, utterly human. And yet, if you climb the steps, slowly, breath short, knees burning, you'll feel something change. At the top, the noise fades, the wind takes over, the city disappears beneath a canopy of green, and the jungle stretches endlessly in every direction. For a moment, you can see what the priest saw, an entire civilization breathing between sky and earth. The horizon trembles with heat, and the world feels eternal. Down below, the ball court waits, a narrow stone alley flanked by sloping walls. The sound of a rubber ball striking limestone echoes like thunder. To play here wasn't a game, it was a ritual. The court itself symbolized the path of the sun through the underworld. Every match was a retelling of creation, every rebound a reminder that life and death were simply turns in the same cosmic cycle. Every Maya city had its own rhythm. Some grew dense and proud, others small and sacred. Palenque shimmered like a marble dream, all elegance and proportion. Copan was intricate, every stairway carved, with hieroglyphs like a stone book. Calakmul sprawled wide and wild, its towers fighting the jungle for height. Yet all shared a single idea. The world was not built once. It was rebuilt endlessly. That's why Maya temples weren't demolished when they aged. They were buried within new ones. The old sanctuaries were sealed, honored, and entombed inside fresh layers of plaster and stone. Every generation wrapped its ancestors in new walls, like shells growing around their own history. Beneath the temples you see today lie dozens of older versions, perfectly preserved, sleeping in darkness. The Maya didn't destroy their past. They protected it. Now imagine walking those buried corridors by torchlight. The air would be cool and dry, heavy with dust. On the walls, murals of kings and priests painted centuries earlier, their colors still vivid. Offerings left untouched. Obsidian knives, jade beads, the faint imprint of a human hand pressed into wet plaster long ago. Each generation left its breath here, sealed away as if time itself were sacred. When night falls, the city changes again. Torches flicker across plazas, and the temples glow with orange halos. From the top of the tallest pyramid, a priest raises a bowl of incense. The smoke twists upward, caught by the wind, until it disappears into the stars. The people below kneel in silence. Somewhere, a drum begins. Slow, steady, heartbeat soft. It's as if the city itself is breathing. The Maya called their cities Kuhul Ajawil, the places of divine lords. They believed that to build was to pray, that architecture could be worship made visible. Each wall was a promise, each stairway a confession, each shadow an offering. Their faith wasn't whispered, it was carved in stone and meant to last as long as the sun kept rising. And so, they built higher, always higher, because to touch the sky was not arrogance, it was duty. One day, though, that duty would turn heavy. The balance between people, gods, and earth would tilt. But for now, the cities of the Maya stand bright and alive, each one tuned perfectly to the heavens, an orchestra of stone and silence, still playing after 1,000 years. It's evening in the Maya world, and the sky is turning the color of copper and smoke. You can hear insects begin their chorus, 1,000 tiny voices blending into one long hum. The city slows, the market quiets, and the priests lift their eyes to the horizon where Venus is about to rise. To the Maya, that first shimmer of light isn't just a planet, it's a heartbeat, a promise kept by the gods, and somewhere in that glow they believe they can read their own fate. The Maya didn't simply measure time, they inhabited it. To them, time wasn't a river flowing from past to future. It was a circle, an endless loop of beginnings and endings that folded into one another like the rings of a tree. Every dawn was also an echo. Every year was a reenactment of what had already been. Life wasn't lived once, it was lived properly, again and again, in the right rhythm. Their calendars reflected that philosophy with astonishing precision. The first, the Zolkin, was sacred. 260 days long, each day ruled by a different combination of 13 numbers and 20 symbols. It dictated the rhythm of ceremonies, marriages, and births. To be born on a certain day wasn't just luck, it was identity. A child's future, their temperament, even their destiny, was tied to the glyph of their birth. Then there was the Hab, the solar calendar of 365 days, 18 months of 20 days, plus 5 nameless days at the end of the year, days that were dangerous, unpredictable, and avoided if possible. During those 5 days, people stayed close to home, lit no fires, and waited for time to begin again. Even gods needed to rest. But the Maya didn't stop there. They wanted to see beyond a single year, beyond a lifetime. So they invented something extraordinary, the long count, a system to track vast stretches of history, reaching back to what they believed was the first dawn of creation. According to their reckoning, that dawn began on a date equivalent to August 11th, 3114 BCE, the beginning of the current world cycle. If you've ever heard that the Maya predicted the end of the world in 2012, this is where that misunderstanding comes from. The long count didn't mark an ending, only the turning of a great wheel, a reset, a renewal. To the Maya, worlds didn't die. They refreshed themselves, just as corn returned after harvest, just as rain followed drought. Picture a priest in a white robe, crouched over a stone tablet, carving tiny glyphs into the surface. Each mark represents a unit of time, a day, a cycle, an age. He isn't writing history. He's balancing it, ensuring that the pattern continues unbroken. To record is to maintain. The sound of his chisel is slow, patient, rhythmic, like someone marking the pulse of eternity. This obsession with time shaped everything, their buildings, their rituals, their sense of self. A Maya city wasn't just aligned to the stars, it was synchronized to the calendar. Temples faced east to greet the sun on exact days. Ceremonies unfolded at calculated intervals. Even warfare and coronations were timed according to celestial cycles. To act out of rhythm was not merely foolish, it was dangerous. The kings were not just rulers, they were timekeepers. When a new ruler ascended the throne, he performed rituals to bind the years, to keep them from unraveling. The hieroglyph for this ceremony literally shows cords being tied around bundles of reeds, symbolizing the gathering of time itself. Without these rituals, it was believed that the world might lose its order, that the sun could stumble, that chaos might return. There's something quietly human in that, isn't there? We all want to believe that if we just stay organized enough, the universe will stay organized too. Even the Maya concept of death fits into this symmetry. When someone died, they didn't vanish. They entered another layer of the same cycle, a shadow world called Xibalba, the place of fear and reflection. But it wasn't hell, not really. It was a realm of challenges and renewal, where the soul could learn, endure, and eventually return to light. Death wasn't an interruption, it was maintenance. The priests watched the heavens constantly, not for superstition, but for reassurance. They tracked Venus through the night sky, its pattern of disappearance, and return a metaphor for life itself. Venus vanished for 8 days, a symbolic death, then reappeared in the dawn, reborn and bright. When it did, rituals flared across the cities, drums, incense, prayers. A collective sigh of relief. The pattern still held. The gods had not forgotten their part. You can imagine the sound, the crackle of fire, the murmur of 1,000 voices whispering the same chant. The low note of a conch shell carried across the plaza. It's hypnotic, and beneath it, you feel something deep and steady. That ancient confidence that the sun will rise again because it always has, because it always must. Time wasn't something the Maya passed through. It was something they fed. They offered it smoke, blood, song, and devotion to keep it moving. To stop performing these acts was to invite decay. Life depended on memory, and memory required ritual. So, when you walk among their ruins now and see the calendars carved into stone, know that you're looking at more than dates. You are looking at faith, faith that existence is a pattern too beautiful to ever truly break. And maybe that's the most enduring secret of the Maya. They built eternity not in years, but in rhythm. And as long as you can still feel that rhythm, the pulse of time in your own chest, their world has never really ended. Part 6. The Gods Who Dreamed the World. Night comes quietly to the Maya world, though it never truly becomes dark. The sky is thick with stars, thousands of them, more than you've ever seen, each one pulsing softly like an ember in the great hearth of the heavens. The air smells faintly of smoke and resin. A priest kneels before a small clay brazier, drops in a handful of copal, and watches the white fumes rise. For him, this isn't smoke, it's a bridge. The Maya believed the universe itself began with a dream. Not the kind you wake from, but the kind that creates. In their stories, the gods first imagined the world before shaping it. Thought became substance, sound became stone, and breath became time. The earth was formed in silence. Then the gods spoke, and reality began. They called their creators the heart of sky and the heart of earth, twin forces in eternal conversation. From their thought came the first rain, the first tree, the first human made of maize, not clay, not flesh, corn. To the Maya, corn was more than food. It was the very substance of life. When they held a kernel in their hand, they were holding themselves. Every morning, the first wisp of smoke from a hearth was an offering to these creator gods, a whispered thank you for another day of breath. And when thunder cracked across the hills, it wasn't weather, it was Chak, the rain god, splitting the clouds with his axe to release water from the sky's belly. Maya religion wasn't about fear, it was about balance. The gods weren't distant or perfect. They were restless, changeable, as flawed and emotional as the world itself. Each one carried both kindness and danger. The rain that fed your crops could also drown them. The sun that warmed your fields could scorch them dry. Worship was not submission. It was negotiation. There were gods for everything: maize, death, wind, jaguars, writing, childbirth, and travelers. Some ruled the heavens, others haunted caves or lakes. The gods of the underworld, the lords of Xibalba, weren't monsters to be banished, but teachers to be respected. They oversaw trials that souls had to pass, lessons to be learned before renewal. You can imagine the sound of a ritual in full motion, drums thudding like heartbeat thunder, flutes crying softly, the scent of flowers crushed under bare feet. The people don't watch passively, they participate. Children throw petals into the air. Women carry bowls of food toward the altars. Priests paint their bodies in blues and reds, colors of sky and blood, balance and sacrifice. In one story, the hero twins, Hunahpu and Exbalanque, descend into Xibalba to play a ball game against the gods of death. They lose, die, and are reborn. Then, in trickster fashion, they outwit the lords of the underworld and ascend to the heavens, becoming the sun and the moon. It's a story of wit over force, of transformation over destruction, the essence of Maya belief. Life was never final. Every loss contained renewal. Every ending hid another beginning. Even the gods themselves died and returned, their fates tied to the turning of the seasons and the cycles of stars. Temples and plazas were designed to echo this cosmic drama. When a king performed rituals atop a pyramid, he wasn't acting alone. He was the earthly mirror of the divine. His blood, drawn with a stingray spine and offered to the gods, was not punishment, but conversation. To bleed was to speak, to suffer was to connect. If you could stand there during one of these ceremonies, you might feel uneasy at first. The drums, the smoke, the chanting that rises and falls like breathing. But soon, it becomes hypnotic. The rhythm takes hold, and you realize it's not meant to frighten. It's meant to synchronize you. Every heartbeat in the plaza begins to move together, every breath aligning with the next, until the entire crowd seems to pulse with a single slow rhythm. The Maya believed that to live well was to keep this rhythm intact, to honor the gods not with words, but with order. Festivals weren't entertainment, they were maintenance. They kept the world running, and if the rituals were neglected, if people forgot their part in the great balance, reality itself could fray. The sun might fail to rise, the rains might never come. So when the priest lifts his hand to the east and murmurs a prayer for dawn, the city waits. Silence deepens. The torches flicker low. A faint brightness touches the horizon, gold melting into blue. Then, at last, the first light spills over the temple walls, turning the carvings to fire. The people exhale together, relieved, grateful, alive. The gods have accepted the offering. The dream continues. But the Maya knew that dreams could shift, even divine ones. The rain sometimes refused to fall. The corn sometimes refused to grow. The gods sometimes turned their faces away, and that quiet dread that the dreamer might forget the dream would one day drive the Maya to desperation and to the rituals the world would never forget. Part 7. Blood, Sacrifice, and Renewal. The sun is high now, blazing white against a sky too bright to look at. The plaza shimmers like glass, heat rising in waves from the stone. The smell of copal incense mixes with something heavier. The sharp metallic tang of blood carried on the air. Drums pulse slowly in the background. It's not chaos, it's rhythm, it's order. To the Maya, blood was not horror. It was currency, the most sacred offering a human could make to keep the universe in motion. They believed that creation itself began with sacrifice, the gods bleeding themselves to give life to the world. The rain fell because the gods' veins were opened. The corn grew because divine flesh had been broken and replanted. Existence was a debt, and the only repayment that made sense was to return what had been borrowed. So when a priest cut his skin or a ruler drew blood from his tongue or earlobe, it wasn't cruelty, it was communication. The rising smoke from the burning cloths, soaked with their blood, was a message sent upward, a kind of cosmic receipt saying, "We remember the agreement." You can almost see it now. A long stairway lined with banners, sunlight catching on obsidian blades, the air thick with sound. Thousands watch from the plaza, faces turned upward, not in fear, but reverence. The ruler steps forward, his hand steady. His expression is calm. Not because he feels nothing, but because he believes entirely in the necessity of this moment. A thin line of blood falls onto paper, which is then set aflame. The smoke curls, twists, and disappears into the blue. To the Maya, that smoke isn't vanishing. It's traveling. It's carrying messages to ancestors, to gods, to the forces that spin the world. Ritual sacrifice, whether of animals, objects, or in some rare cases humans, was a way to keep the cycles balanced. A world that demanded life also required reminders of its cost. Without offering, there was imbalance, and imbalance invited disaster. It's tempting to look at these scenes and recoil, to see them only as brutality. But if you stood in that crowd, if you understood the world as they did, you might feel something different, a strange calm, even beauty. The people around you whisper prayers not for death, but for rain, for crops, for children to live through the next dry season. They don't celebrate pain, they honor continuity. Blood was more than physical. It was symbolic of vitality, memory, and renewal. The body was the microcosm of the universe. Veins were rivers. Breath was wind. When blood touched fire, it became smoke, the bridge between earth and heaven. Sacrifice was not destruction. It was transformation. And there were subtler rituals too. A mother pricking her finger to bless her newborn. A farmer cutting his palm before planting the first seed. A healer smearing a drop of his own blood on a sick child's forehead. Tiny exchanges between life and the divine, constant reminders that nothing living was ever truly separate from the gods. The ball game, too, carried the weight of sacrifice. Played in long stone courts lined with carved serpents, it was more than sport. It was theater, myth made flesh. Two teams faced each other, passing a heavy rubber ball without using hands, only hips, elbows, and knees. The goal was cosmic balance, not victory. The court symbolized the passage of the sun through the underworld. When the game ended, one side might be offered to the gods. Death was not punishment, it was promotion. To die on the court was to step directly into the myth of creation. Listen to the crowd. They cheer, they chant, they clap in rhythm. The sound echoes off the walls in strange ways, returning as a bird-like trill, as if the city itself is answering. A player scores. The ball bounces. A priest raises his hand. The drums stop. Silence falls so heavy you can feel it pressing on your skin. Then the smoke begins again. In that moment, the plaza feels like the center of the universe, because to the Maya, it is. Every ceremony, every offering, is a small reenactment of the first dawn. To them, the gods gave blood to make humans, so humans must give blood to keep the gods awake. It's reciprocity, a closed loop, a living clock wound by devotion. And yet, beneath the faith, there's a whisper of unease. The rains are less predictable, the stars seem slightly off course. The priests say the gods demand more smoke, more song, more blood. The drums sound louder these days, the rituals longer, the sacrifices heavier. Somewhere, a farmer looks at the sky and wonders whether the gods are listening or simply growing tired. You can almost feel the weight of that anxiety in the air, that tension between devotion and fear, between faith and doubt. The same drumbeat that once comforted the city now sounds a little desperate. But for now, the ceremonies continue. The incense burns, the priests chant, and the people believe, because to stop believing would be unthinkable. The sun still rises, the corn still grows, and every drop of blood spilled on the stones reminds them that life, even when it hurts, is a bargain worth keeping. Part 8. The pulse of daily life. The drums fade, the incense cools, the city exhales, rituals end, but life continues. The steady rhythm beneath all the ceremony, the quiet hours that make up most of a human existence. If you strip away the temples, the kings, the gods, what remains is this: families waking to the cry of birds, fires being kindled, children laughing through dust and light. For the Maya, the extraordinary was always built on the ordinary, and so the day begins. The sun hasn't yet climbed far when the first sounds rise. A mother grinding maize on a metate, the rhythmic scrape of stone against stone. It's a sound you could measure time by, a heartbeat of every Maya home. The air smells faintly of roasted corn and damp clay. Somewhere outside, a rooster calls, though no one owns him. He belongs to the whole village. The houses are simple, wooden posts, woven reed walls, roofs thick with palm leaves. Inside, it's dim and cool. The floor is packed earth, swept smooth each morning. In one corner, a clay stove burns low, and a pot of maize porridge simmers, sending up a thin thread of steam. A child stirs it lazily with a stick, tracing patterns that look like the same spirals carved on the city's temples. The patterns are everywhere, even in breakfast. Outside, the world hums with work. Men head toward the fields, carrying stone tools, nets, and baskets. The crops, maize, beans, squash, chili, grow in carefully arranged spirals, just like the heavens above them. The earth is dry at first, but the first swing of the digging stick breaks the soil open and releases a scent older than memory. The smell of life beginning again. The women stay close to home, weaving cotton into cloth. Their looms are simple, a few sticks, some thread, and patience. The designs they weave are not decorative. Each one tells a story, about lineage, about gods, about rain. Their hands move with quiet confidence, fingers knowing more than the mind needs to. The pattern grows slowly, a visible rhythm of thought. A dog wanders through the courtyard. A parrot screeches from the rafters. The air is thick with warmth, but not uncomfortable. It feels like being inside a living creature, breathing, sweating, dreaming. You can almost hear the jungle breathing too, just beyond the edge of the village. At midday, the sky becomes harsh. The workers return, glistening with sweat. Children run to greet them, clinging to their legs, laughing. Lunch is simple. Maize tortillas, beans, maybe a bit of roasted turkey or fish if the season allows. Everyone eats together, crouched on low stools or sitting on the floor, their shadows small and soft. Conversation is quiet. Words are not wasted. Stories, however, are sacred. When someone speaks of the ancestors, it isn't nostalgia, it's participation. The dead aren't gone, they're listening. Their names are spoken softly, almost like prayer. A pot cracks in the heat, and someone smiles, murmuring that an ancestor must have walked by. There's no fear in that. The boundary between worlds is thin and friendly. After the meal, the city dozes, work slows, even the birds go quiet. This is the hour when time itself seems to loosen. You can imagine lying in the shade, hearing the faint buzzing of insects, the rustle of wind moving through corn leaves. The sun burns above, relentless and distant, but life here adapts. It bends, never breaks. As the afternoon fades, the markets awaken. Plazas fill with chatter and color. Women in bright huipilis trade salt and cacao, feathers and fish, pottery and honey. The smell of smoke and fruit fills the air. There's laughter, gossip, bargaining, all the small negotiations that make up the great one. Somewhere, a musician plays a clay flute. The sound is thin but sweet, curling through the crowd like a thought. A merchant unwraps a bundle of jade beads, their green glint catching the light. A farmer barters a handful of cacao beans for a new fishing net. A child steals a mango and runs, laughing, through the legs of strangers. Nothing here feels ancient or mysterious. It's ordinary, bustling, alive. And that's what makes it so sacred. As the sky reddens, smoke begins to rise again. Fires are lit for evening meals. The smell of roasted maize returns, joined by the earthy scent of burning wood. Families gather around their hearths, and the conversations grow slower. Old stories return. The hero twins, the lords of Xibalba, the creation of the world. The children listen wide-eyed, tracing the constellations with their fingers. Above, the stars begin to bloom one by one. The same stars that priests chart from temple tops are watched now from doorways and courtyards. People chew roasted corn, sip warm cacao, and talk about the weather. For all their sophistication, the Maya never forgot that the world, in the end, belongs to those who live it, who till its soil, breathe its air, and wait patiently for rain. And when the fire burns low, when the crickets start their endless song, The families drift asleep on woven mats, wrapped in the same rhythms that have pulsed for centuries. The gods might live in temples, the kings might rule from palaces, but the heart of the Maya world beats here, in the quiet houses, the fields, the stories whispered to children falling asleep. Tomorrow will be the same, and that's the beauty of it. In repetition, there is peace. In routine, there is faith. And in every small act, cooking, weaving, planting, the Maya find eternity hidden in the simplest moments of life. Part 9. Corn, cocoa, and the breath of the earth. Before dawn, the fields are already awake. Mist lies low across the soil, coiling around the stalks of corn like a soft veil. You can hear the rustle of leaves and the chirp of hidden insects, but it's the wind that carries the real sound, a kind of slow breathing, as if the earth itself were alive and dreaming. For the Maya, that's exactly what it was. Corn was not merely food, it was ancestry, it was flesh, spirit, identity. Their own creation story told it plainly. Humans were formed from ground maize, kneaded with divine water, given life by breath and song. So every meal, every planting season, every harvest was an act of remembrance. When they ate corn, they were renewing the bond between gods and mortals, consuming themselves to stay alive. A Maya farmer would begin the day by speaking softly to his seeds before burying them in the soil. He didn't pray for the corn to grow. He reminded it why it must. Each kernel carried a spark of the gods' generosity, and planting was a kind of conversation, a promise between giver and keeper. The stick that broke the earth was called the staff of life, and each hole it opened was a doorway for renewal. The land answered in rhythm. Rain came, sometimes late, sometimes heavy, but always with a story. The first drops on the leaves were greeted like old friends, a soft applause from the heavens. Farmers would tilt their heads up, letting the rain strike their faces, whispering the name of Chak, the god of storms. Every gust of wind, every rumble of thunder was part of that sacred dialogue. Alongside maize grew the other twins of survival, beans and squash. Together, they formed the three sisters, the holy trinity of Maya sustenance. The beans gave back what the corn took. The squash shielded the soil from the sun. Nothing was wasted, nothing left alone. The field wasn't an economic system, it was a moral one. And then there was cacao, not the sweet, creamy chocolate of today, but a bitter drink made from roasted beans spiced with chili and honey, whipped into foam until it frothed like clouds in a stormy sky. Cacao was luxury, medicine, and prayer. Kings drank it before rituals. Lovers shared it before marriage. Priests offered it to the gods as a symbol of blood. Even its beans were currency, small, fragrant coins that bought fish, cloth, or obsidian knives in the markets. But deeper than wealth, cacao represented vitality. Its dark color was the shadow of life itself. To drink it was to taste the strength of the jungle. Food for the Maya wasn't just survival, it was storytelling. Each flavor, maize, chili, salt, honey, carried memory. The smoke rising from the hearth was a message to the gods. The smell of roasted corn was the scent of gratitude. If you walked through a Maya village at midday, you'd smell the entire cosmos. Clay pots simmering with stew, roasting peppers sending sharp sweetness into the air, tortillas sizzling on stone griddles. The rhythm of daily hunger tied everyone together. The gods didn't live in temples alone. They lived in kitchens, in gardens, in the soft crackle of fire. In the cities, feasts were symphonies. Tables of woven reed mats covered in tamales wrapped in green leaves, bowls of beans flavored with herbs, gourds filled with honey and chocolate, roasted turkey spiced with achiote, a riot of scent and sound. People sat in circles, not rows. Eating was communal, rhythmic. Each person served the other, echoing the cycle of giving and receiving that ruled their world. The air during a feast was thick with laughter. Children darted between the adults, chasing dogs and stealing bites. Musicians played reed flutes and turtle shells. The warm, humid night smelled of smoke and sweet fruit. If you listened closely, you could hear gratitude in every sound, not loud, not shouted, but humming softly beneath the surface of joy. And yet, for all this abundance, there was fragility. A single season of drought could undo everything. The rains might fail, the corn might wither in the fields. A year of poor harvests meant hunger, migration, despair. The same gods who gave life could withhold it, and the Maya knew this balance intimately. They didn't curse the sky when it stayed blue too long. They listened harder. They offered more. You can almost see the scene. A field of dry stalks rattling like bones in the wind. A farmer standing silent at the edge, his face lined with sun and patience. He holds a handful of seeds, the last of his store, and kneels to plant them anyway. Not in hope exactly, in duty, in rhythm. Because if he stops, the cycle stops, and stopping is unthinkable. The Maya lived by a simple truth. To feed the earth is to feed yourself. Every offering, a drop of blood, a seed, a whisper, returns, transformed. When night falls and the fires burn low, families gather around their final meal of the day. Bowls of corn and cacao pass from hand to hand. The air smells faintly of smoke and sweetness. Outside, the jungle hums, alive, endless, waiting. They eat slowly, they speak softly, they thank the gods who dreamed them into being, and above them the stars shimmer like grains of corn scattered across a black field, infinite, glowing, and hungry for light. Part 10. The Faces of Power. The morning sun strikes the temples first, sharp, golden, absolute. Below, the plazas begin to fill with movement. Merchants spread woven mats to display their goods. Priests walk barefoot through corridors of light and shadow. And above them all, from the highest terrace, a single figure watches. His face is calm, unreadable, almost divine. He is the Ajor, the Holy Lord, the living embodiment of power. And in the Maya world, power isn't just political, it's cosmic. To rule is to carry the weight of the heavens. The king doesn't simply govern his people, he mediates between the mortal and the divine, ensuring that both remain in balance. When he speaks, it isn't considered speech, it's considered weather. His words are storms, rain, harvests. His silence can mean drought. The Maya ruler's headdress alone tells the story. It's enormous, feathers from the quetzal bird cascading like green fire, jade beads glittering in the light, carved bone and shell framing the face. It's heavy too, easily 40 pounds or more. Each piece represents the power of those who came before. When the ruler moves, he carries centuries of authority on his skull. In ceremonies, he's not dressed for comfort, but for meaning. Every color, every symbol matters. The red of his cloak mirrors blood and sunrise, sacrifice and renewal. The blue of his ornaments speaks to the sky and the divine waters. The jade at his throat represents life itself, that rare green stone that never fades. When he climbs the steps to the top of the temple, people below stop breathing for a moment. The drums slow, the air thickens. His every gesture has purpose, lifting a torch, scattering incense, touching his chest before raising his arms to the horizon. He is not praying to the gods, he is performing them. For a brief instant, he becomes one. Kingship for the Maya was not inherited lightly. A boy born into a royal line was trained from infancy to embody his ancestors. He learned not just language and war, but astronomy, mathematics, ritual, and the sacred art of auto-sacrifice. To rule meant to understand the sky as well as the sword. And so, each ruler's reign was woven into time itself. He began by seeding the Khatun, marking his era in the calendar, binding the years like a bundle of reeds. His name would be carved on stelae, those tall stone monuments scattered across plazas. The glyphs told his deeds, his lineage, his divine right to rule. To the people who saw them, those stones weren't propaganda. They were proof of cosmic order. But beneath the grandeur, there was pressure, immense, unrelenting pressure. If the rains failed, the crops died, or war brought famine, it was the king who had failed the gods. His blood might be demanded to restore balance. A ruler's worth was measured not by wealth, but by the harmony of the seasons. Power here was never safe. Imagine a ruler in his private chamber, the torches flickering low. The air smells of sweat and copal. His attendants withdraw. He kneels before a bowl of sharp obsidian blades, one cut along his earlobe, one across his tongue. He winces, but there is no cry. The drops of blood fall onto folded bark paper, which will soon be burned. Smoke rising into the night, a message delivered. He is the sun and the storm, the mediator of meaning. But he is also human, and he bleeds. In public, though, there is no weakness. During festivals, the king sits on a throne carved from limestone, its back rising like the wings of a bird. He's surrounded by attendants with fans made of palm leaves, his face painted red and black, his eyes ringed in coal. The plaza below is packed. Traders, farmers, children, dancers, all waiting to witness the reenactment of creation. He lifts his hand, and the drums begin. The priests chant. Dancers wearing jaguar skins leap and roar, their shadows twisting on the temple walls. Smoke thickens until the air itself seems alive. The ruler steps forward, holding a staff tipped with jade and gold. For a moment, he looks less like a man and more like a fragment of the sky that has chosen to descend to earth. And yet, even here, there's irony. For all his godlike power, the king is trapped, bound to the same cycles as everyone else. His rule depends on keeping the world balanced, but the world never truly stands still. The rains falter, the stars drift, the gods grow restless, and the ruler's glory can vanish as quickly as the smoke from his own offering bowl. The Maya understood that too well. That's why every coronation came with humility, offerings, prayers, blood. Every monument was both declaration and plea. The words carved into stone often end the same way. May it be in order, may it endure. You can feel that quiet desperation even now, walking among the ruins. The stelae stand tall, their surfaces cracked but still legible. The faces of kings eroded by centuries of rain. The headdresses are gone. The jade has turned to dust, but the lines of their mouths, calm, dignified, unyielding, remain. You can still see the effort to believe, to hold the sky in place a little longer. And maybe that's what kingship really meant here. Not dominance, but endurance. Not command, but continuity. As night falls, the ruler steps back into the shadows of his temple. The plaza empties, the drums grow faint, the torches flicker out one by one. Tomorrow, the world will wake again, and he will have to hold it steady all over again. Part 11, Women, Family, and Society. The world of the Maya was built by kings and priests, or so the stones would have you believe. But listen more carefully, and you'll hear the quieter rhythms beneath all that grandeur, the hum of the hearth, the murmur of mothers, the steady pulse of hands that fed, wove, healed, and raised entire generations. If the king held the heavens, it was women who kept the earth alive. At sunrise, before the first smoke curled from the temples, Maya women were already awake. The sound of grinding stones echoed from every courtyard, that soft, familiar scrape of maize being crushed into dough. It's a small sound, but it holds the same importance as a priest's chant. Without it, the city doesn't eat. Without it, the gods go hungry. The women's world began at the hearth. It wasn't confinement, it was command. Fire, food, water, birth, all these belonged to them. The hearthstones themselves were sacred, often arranged in sets of 3 to symbolize the cosmic fire that created the world. When a woman lit her cooking fire, she was reenacting creation. Every meal was an echo of the first dawn. Their clothing told its own stories. The huipil, a hand-woven tunic, was more than cloth. It was lineage, geography, and prayer worn on the skin. The patterns varied from village to village, from family to family. Some represented mountains or rivers, others the eyes of gods. When a woman wove, she wasn't making fashion. She was writing history in thread. Even childbirth was a ritual act. The mother became a warrior, battling the threshold between life and death. The midwives who attended her were priests in their own right, chanting, blessing, and guiding the soul of the newborn into the world. When the child's first cry pierced the air, it was believed that the ancestors leaned closer to listen. A new voice had joined the chorus. Family life revolved around the cycles of nature and the responsibilities of kinship. Fathers taught sons to hunt, to farm, to trade. Mothers taught daughters to weave, to heal, to keep stories alive. Grandparents were living archives, memory made flesh. To disobey an elder was not rebellion, it was heresy. They carried the knowledge of when to plant, when to pray, and when to stay silent. In the markets, women ruled. They traded pottery, food, fabrics, and gossip in equal measure. The plazas were loud with bargaining, laughter, and the occasional scolding. Wealth passed through their hands, not only in goods, but in information. Who was marrying whom, which fields had failed, which gods were pleased. The heartbeat of the economy was feminine. Even in politics, women had presence. Maya queens were not mere ornaments beside their husbands. Many ruled in their own right. Women like Lady Six Sky of Naranjo or Lady Kay, Abel of Calakmul, who led armies, negotiated treaties, and commissioned temples. Their names appear on stelae beside those of kings, their faces calm and regal. In one inscription, a queen is described as the holy child of the sun, who commands both earth and sky. To the Maya, power didn't depend on gender. It depended on balance. Male and female were not opposites. They were complements. The gods themselves were often paired, one of sky and one of earth, one of sun and one of rain, each sustaining the other. Harmony required both. Daily life, too, reflected this equilibrium. Men went to war or to the fields. Women guarded the hearth, the heart of continuity. Each knew that their work was half of a whole. In the evenings, when the men returned, the fire would already be burning, the smell of corn and beans drifting through the air. Children would sit at their parents' feet, listening to stories of gods and ancestors, learning the patterns that gave meaning to existence. You can almost see it, a mother weaving by torchlight, her fingers moving with a rhythm older than words. A baby sleeping beside her, the soft glow of the fire flickering across their faces. Outside, the forest murmurs and the night insects sing. It's domestic, yes, but there's something profoundly cosmic in it. The repetition of care, the endless renewal of life through small, steady acts. Even aging had dignity. Wrinkles were not hidden. They were respected, counted like hieroglyphs of experience. An old woman's hands, cracked and calloused, were seen as holy, proof that she had touched the world long enough to shape it. Her advice carried weight, not because of authority, but because of memory. Death, too, was part of the household rhythm. When someone died, their body was washed, wrapped, and buried beneath the floor of their home. The living walked above them every day, a literal reminder that life stands upon life. Offerings of food and flowers were placed at the spot, so the departed could continue to eat, to breathe through the smoke of the hearth. In this way, death wasn't a departure, it was residency at a different address. This balance of male and female, birth and death, sky and soil, held Maya society together for centuries. It made their world resilient, intimate, whole, but it also meant that when cracks appeared, when war and drought upset the rhythm, the tremors reached every hearth. For now, though, as night falls and the city hums softly under the stars, everything still feels in order. The fires burn evenly. The laughter of families drifts through open doorways. Somewhere in the distance, a child falls asleep to the sound of his mother's voice, telling stories that were already old before the first temple was built. And for that child, and for all of them, the world still seems endless, balanced, and kind. Part 12, The Art of War and the Silence. After war, to the Maya, was never just about conquest. It was about meaning, a continuation of the same cosmic rhythm that guided their crops, their rituals, their very breath. The battlefield, like the temple, was sacred ground. Every fight was a negotiation with fate. Every victory, a conversation with the gods. If you listen to the jungle closely enough, you might still hear the echoes, the low beat of drums that once called warriors to assemble, the rustle of banners made from jaguar pelts, the faint metallic clink of obsidian blades tapping against wooden hilts. There's no clamor, no chaos, only rhythm. The Maya fought as they built, with ceremony, precision, and purpose. Each city-state, Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, Copan, was both ally and rival, bound together in cycles of trade, marriage, and inevitable betrayal. When diplomacy failed, the gods demanded motion. A campaign would begin with omens, a priest reading the sky, a scribe tracing glyphs to find a favorable day. The stars had to agree before any blood was spilled. Weapons were humble but deadly, spears tipped with obsidian, bows strung with twisted fiber, clubs inlaid with sharp flakes of volcanic glass that could slice flesh like sunlight cuts through leaves. Armor was cotton, thickened with salt and hardened by fire, light enough for the humidity, strong enough to turn a blade. Before battle, warriors painted their bodies with red and black, colors of life and death. Some wore jaguar skins, others donned feathers that shimmered green and gold under the sun. Each face was a mask of devotion, a declaration that this fight was not for territory, but for cosmic balance. They didn't charge blindly. They advanced with chants, with drums, with slow, deliberate steps, as if keeping time with the heart of the world itself. At their center marched the nobles, kings and princes whose duty was to lead, not from behind, but from the very front. To be captured was not shame, it was destiny. The taking of prisoners was sacred. War wasn't about extermination, it was about capture, ceremony, and renewal. A prisoner might later be sacrificed in ritual, not as punishment, but as offering. His life completed a circle that began in another world. It's easy to forget how personal these wars were. There were no distant empires commanding faceless legions, only neighbors, brothers, former allies. One season, they traded cacao and obsidian. The next, they met across the field as enemies. But hatred was never the fuel. Duty was. When the fighting ended, there was no triumphal parade. The survivors returned quietly to their cities, their faces smeared with ashes, their weapons laid before the gods. The air smelled of blood and rain and crushed grass. The plazas filled not with cheers, but with silence, the kind of silence that follows a storm, heavy and absolute. In that silence, the Maya reflected. War, like farming, was a harvest, brutal, necessary, rhythmic. The gods received what they were owed. Life, briefly unbalanced, was set right again. But beneath that ritual calm, something was shifting. Wars grew more frequent. The prizes, captives, tribute, prestige mattered more. Rival kings sought not just equilibrium, but dominance. Great alliances formed and shattered like pottery dropped from the heavens. The city of Tikal rose to unimaginable heights of power, only to clash again and again with its mirror, Calakmul, two giants circling each other like twin suns destined to collide. The wars became longer, hungrier. Farmers were taken from their fields. Priests prayed louder. The gods, it seemed, demanded more and more to stay appeased. And so the plazas filled again, the drums beat harder, the captives marched slower. Even victory began to taste bitter. Still, the warriors believed. They always believed. They returned from battle with offerings, trophies of jade, carved bones, glyphs of conquest etched in stone. Their deeds were recorded on stelae for future generations, not to glorify violence, but to remind their descendants of the rhythm, struggle, offering, renewal. In one carving, a ruler stands over a kneeling prisoner. The defeated man's head is bowed, his hands bound. Yet the scene isn't cruel. It's strangely serene. Both men's faces are calm, as though they understand the symmetry of it. One gives, the other receives. Both fulfill their roles in a cycle older than memory. If you close your eyes, you can almost smell the aftermath. The rain that always follows battle, washing the stones clean, carrying away the blood, cooling the air. The jungle, indifferent, resumes its song. Birds return to the trees. Frogs call to each other across the puddles. And the city, for now, exhales. To the Maya, peace was not the opposite of war. It was simply the space between heartbeats. And even as they sharpened their obsidian and prepared for the next campaign, they believed this, that every act of destruction was only half the story, and that somewhere, just out of sight, life was already beginning again. Part 13, The Web of Trade and the Roads of Stone. If war was the pulse of ambition, then trade was the quiet bloodstream of the Maya world, invisible, constant, essential. Long before roads were drawn on maps, they were carved through jungle and swamp by bare feet, connecting kingdoms like veins beneath the skin of the earth. Along them moved not just goods, but stories, beliefs, and rumors, the subtle threads that held the civilization together. The Maya called these white roads sakbyub, meaning paths of light. Made from crushed limestone, they gleamed in the sun and glowed faintly in the moonlight, smooth as bone, straight as faith. They stretched for miles, linking temples to villages, ports to mountains, city to city. Some were so wide you could march an army across them. Others were narrow trails only a merchant and his mule-less pack could traverse. To walk one was to follow the rhythm of civilization itself, steady, dusty, endless. Along these roads, caravans of traders, polam, traveled in small groups, carrying goods in woven baskets strapped to their backs. They walked barefoot, their feet hardened like stone, their pace unhurried. Each man carried not only merchandise, but protection, an amulet, a charm, a prayer. The jungle could be cruel, and the gods of the road unpredictable. Their cargoes were small but precious, cacao beans, feathers from the quetzal and macaw, jade, obsidian, salt, honey, dried fish, cotton cloth, copper bells, turtle shells, incense, and shells from distant coasts. To a stranger, the baskets would look ordinary. To the Maya, they were sacred economies, every object part of the balance that sustained life. Trade was not greed. It was reciprocity. When one city had salt and another had jade, the exchange was not just transaction, it was a promise of trust. Each trade renewed the web that kept the world in motion. Goods changed hands, but meaning flowed with them. Picture the markets of a great city like Chichen Itza or Tikal. The plazas are loud, alive with color. Women arrange baskets of chili peppers in gourds. Men haggle over obsidian blades, each piece gleaming like trapped midnight. The smell of roasting maize and honey drifts through the air. Somewhere, a scribe sits under a shade cloth, recording prices on bark paper, not with ink, but with symbols that mark what things mean, not just what they're worth. Here, The sacred and the practical are indistinguishable. A cacao bean isn't just money, it's also the essence of life, a drop of divine blood hardened into something tangible. To spend it is to participate in creation itself. The market is an extension of the temple, every bargain a small ritual. And yet, beyond the noise, trade is also a story of endurance. Merchants walk for weeks, sleeping under trees, guided by stars, crossing rivers on narrow canoes. Their sandals wear thin, their shoulders ache. Sometimes they pass through rival territories and must pay tribute or face capture. A wrong word at a border could mean the difference between commerce and conflict. Still, they go on. At night, when they make camp along a sacp, they light small fires and share tales. They talk of distant kings and new temples rising out of the forests. They describe strange goods from stranger lands. Turquoise from the north, copper from the highlands, obsidian from volcanic ridges, salt from the coast. Around the fire, the map of their world expands, invisible, infinite, held together by memory. Through them, cities stayed alive. A drought in one region didn't mean starvation if traders arrived with surplus grain. A war in one kingdom might ripple through others as merchants whispered of new alliances, new enemies. Information traveled faster than armies. The Maya didn't have wheels or horses, but they had something better, a network of human endurance, flexible and eternal. These roads were arteries not only for goods, but for ideas. Mathematics, astronomy, language, and ritual spread along the same routes as salt and feathers. A carving style born in one city appeared generations later, hundreds of miles away. A new myth might travel farther than the merchant who carried it. The Sakbiob themselves were engineering marvels, raised, drained, and paved through swamp and jungle. Some were built centuries before the cities they connected, as if the land itself foresaw where the people would one day walk. Even after empires fell and temples crumbled, the white roads endured, ghostly lines under the trees, glowing faintly under moonlight. Trade kept peace as much as it provoked war. A ruler could order a raid, but if merchants stopped coming, the gods might turn their faces away. A silent marketplace was a dangerous omen. The Maya knew this, so even when rival kings fought, their traders often moved freely, escorted under banners of neutrality, blessed by priests from both sides. Every act of exchange was a heartbeat, every marketplace a lung, and every trader a messenger of continuity. When you imagine the Maya world, don't see isolated cities swallowed by forest. See motion, people walking white roads in steady rhythm, carrying the breath of one city to the next, keeping the balance alive. And in the quiet of night, when the roads are empty and the jungle hums, you can still picture it, a single traveler, moving through the dark, guided by fireflies and memory carrying a pouch of cacao, a story and a bit of sunlight from one horizon to another. Part 14. The Heart of the Jungle, Tikal and its neighbors. Dawn breaks over the lowlands and the jungle exhales a veil of steam. The air smells of wet bark, orchids, and thyme. Then, through the haze, it appears, a shape too perfect to be nature, a sharp edge, a clean line, a human intention rising from the green infinity. You are looking at Tikal, the beating heart of the Maya world. At its height, it was one of the largest cities on Earth. Tens of thousands lived here, perhaps more. The skyline was a forest of temples, their peaks stabbing through the canopy like the fingers of gods. When the sun rose, each temple flared gold, the light bouncing from stone to stone in a silent sequence, as if the city itself were performing a ritual of illumination. The jungle didn't just surround Tikal, it defined it. Life here was both gift and test. The people farmed in thin soil, managed water with miraculous skill, and endured the constant war between humidity and decay. Yet out of that struggle came beauty, plazas so vast you could walk an hour and still hear the echo of your own steps, stele carved with rulers so intricate that even their jewelry had stories written into it. Tikal's power was not just in its temples, but in its network, the invisible threads stretching to its neighbors, Calakmul, Palenque, Karakol, Copan. Together, they formed a constellation of cities, each one brilliant in its own way, each one competing to shine brightest. But Tikal was the sun among them, proud, radiant, and sometimes merciless. From the central acropolis, rulers looked down upon a city that pulsed like a living body. Courtyards filled with traders, farmers, nobles and slaves. Priests moved through columns of smoke. Music drifted from distant squares. The air shimmered with incense, sweat, and ambition. But beneath the grandeur lay rivalry. Tikal and Calakmul, twin giants of the classic age, circled each other for centuries. Sometimes allies, often enemies, they fought wars not only with weapons, but with monuments, marriages, and myths. When Tikal raised a new temple, Calakmul answered with one taller. When one king declared divine lineage, the other carved a stone proclaiming descent from the stars. It was less a war of armies than of narratives, and yet, even in competition, they were connected. Between their cities ran those bright limestone roads, the Sakbiob, carrying diplomats, merchants, and spies. The jungle between them wasn't a border. It was a stage. Messengers slipped through its shadows with secrets folded into bark paper scrolls. Some never returned. Those who did carried both gifts and threats, wrapped in the same polite phrases. Inside Tikal, the calendar ruled all. Each ceremony had its place in time, each offering its precise moment. The priest's duty was not to innovate, but to align. When Venus appeared in the morning sky, they burned incense on the eastern platforms, whispering the same prayers that had been whispered for centuries. It was this rhythm, precise, relentless, that made Tikal endure. Walk through it in your mind. The great plaza, a vast courtyard where two pyramids face each other like mirrors, one to the east, one to the west. The rising sun strikes the eastern face, setting it ablaze in light. At sunset, the western one glows in its turn. Between them, the plaza is a bowl of gold at dawn and dusk. The people gather here for rituals, markets, music. Children play along the steps while the elders watch, their faces painted with ochre and lime. Everywhere you go, there's movement. A line of nobles descends a staircase, jade ornaments clinking softly. Artisans chip stone in narrow workshops. A woman weaves under a thatched awning, her shuttle sliding back and forth like a pendulum marking time. At night, the sound of drums echoes through the corridors, carried by the wind. Firelight dances on plaster walls still painted in red and blue. The city doesn't sleep, it dreams. The temples glow faintly, as if remembering the sun. Tikal was not alone in its brilliance. To the west, Palenque shone like a carved poem, graceful, introspective, adorned with hieroglyphs that read like whispers. To the south, Copan was a scholar's city, its stairways inscribed with the entire history of kingship, every glyph a word in a language of eternity. And to the east, Caracol's power grew quietly, patient as the vines that wrapped its temples. These cities traded, married, fought, and learned from one another. Their art traveled faster than their armies. Styles of pottery, forms of writing, architectural details, all passed along the web of roads and rivers, blending and mutating like ideas themselves. If you stood on a temple top and looked out across the endless forest, you wouldn't see isolation. You'd see connection, invisible but alive. The rulers of these cities knew they were part of something larger. They called it the Divine Assembly, not an empire, but a family of sacred centers, each keeping the world in balance through ritual and competition. When one city grew weak, another rose to take its place. The system pulsed, expanded, contracted, like lungs, but lungs can falter, and by the time Tikal reached its greatest splendor, something beneath the surface was shifting. The forests were thinning, the rains were faltering, the wars between neighbors grew longer and less symbolic. It was as if the web that connected the cities had begun to tighten, and what once carried breath was now choking its host. Still, from the heights of its pyramids, the world must have looked eternal. The jungle stretched forever, the temple stood unshaken, and as night settled once more, the people of Tikal whispered the same old prayers, believing that if the stars remained steady, so would they. Part 15. The Minds of Stone and the Glyphs of Time. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the sound of a chisel striking limestone. Not violently, patiently. Tap, pause, scrape, tap again. Each blow releases a tiny puff of white dust, hanging in the humid air like incense. Beneath the artisan's hands, a figure begins to emerge, not just a king or god, but a sentence, a thought, carved into permanence. To the Maya, writing was not invention, it was discovery, a sacred act of revealing what was already there in the bones of the world. Words weren't made, they were excavated. Their script, composed of hundreds of intricate glyphs, is one of the most complex writing systems ever created. Each sign could represent a sound, a word, or an entire concept, depending on context. A single square of stone might tell a full paragraph if you knew how to read it, and the Maya did. They were poets with blades. The scribes were quiet magicians. They worked in dim, cool rooms, painting or carving with perfect precision. Their tools were feathers, brushes of animal hair, obsidian knives, and patience that bordered on the divine. They dipped their pens in ink made from soot and plant resin, their strokes smooth as breathing. On bark paper codices, folded books of light and shadow, they recorded astronomy, ritual, genealogy, and myth. A scribe wasn't simply literate, he was a bridge between worlds. To write was to fix time, to tie the present to eternity. When a ruler commissioned a stela, he wasn't ordering propaganda, he was setting a clock in stone. The date, the deeds, the lineage, all aligned with cosmic events so that history itself became part of the universe's rhythm. You can almost see him now, a young scribe crouched before a slab, tracing a glyph for sun, its shape curling like flame. He pauses to blow the dust from the groove, then moves to the next, the sign for Lord, then cycle, then rebirth. When he finishes, the wall will speak long after his bones have turned to dust. Maya glyphs are more than writing, they are art. Each is a miniature sculpture, a world of lines, eyes, teeth, feathers, curls, and breath. They combine in patterns that feel alive, as if the words themselves were thinking. To read them is to hear the ancient voice still whispering beneath the stone, elegant, deliberate, amused by its own endurance. Even mathematics, for the Maya, was poetic. Their number system was based on 20, the total of fingers and toes. It used 3 simple symbols, a dot for 1, a bar for 5, and a shell for 0. That last symbol, 0, might be their greatest gift to humanity. While much of the world still counted emptiness as absence, the Maya saw it as presence, a pause that made meaning possible. They gave nothing a name, and by doing so, gave time its shape. Astronomy was the heartbeat of this intellectual world. Priests tracked the paths of planets with precision that would shame modern tools. They charted eclipses centuries before they occurred, traced the shifting dance of Venus and Mars, and understood the solar year to within a fraction of a day. From this knowledge, they built calendars so accurate that our own still bow to them in quiet respect. At night, they climbed their observatories, those round, windowed towers of stone, and watched the heavens. Through narrow slits, they measured the rising of stars, the turning of seasons. The stars were not distant fires. They were gods on a predictable schedule, and the scribe's duty was to ensure that schedule was never forgotten. Knowledge wasn't hoarded in libraries, it lived in ceremony. Every piece of data, every number, name, and pattern served a purpose in ritual life. The Maya never separated science from faith. To understand the cosmos was to serve it. A priest calculating Venus' position wasn't doing astronomy for curiosity, sac. He was maintaining the health of the universe. Their books, the codices, were treasures of color and motion. Painted on bark paper coated in white lime, they unfolded like long, delicate scrolls. On them danced gods, numbers, animals, and celestial signs, all rendered in reds, blues, and golds. They were read not silently, but aloud, performed, as if words could only live when given voice. Tragically, most of these codices are gone. When the Spaniards arrived centuries later, they burned them. Thousands of years of knowledge reduced to ash in a few nights of holy fire. Only 4 are known to survive. Imagine a library collapsing into smoke, each curl of flame erasing a calendar, a poem, a name. The silence left behind still feels heavy, but the stones endured. The stelae kept their voices, and slowly, patient hands in our own time began to listen again. Archaeologists, epigraphers, linguists, all decoding the language once thought lost. Each glyph deciphered is like a heartbeat returning after centuries of stillness. Now we can read their words. Here stands the Holy Lord of Tikal. On this day, the sun was reborn. He bound the years and offered his blood. Simple, steady, eternal. When you walk through the ruins today, you walk through a library. Every wall is a page. Every carving is a sentence. The language of stone outlasts its speakers. And if you run your fingers along those ancient grooves, you might feel a faint pulse. The heartbeat of minds who believed that to carve truth was to make it immortal. Part 16. The artists, the builders, and the beauty of order. The sound of the hammer fades, replaced by another rhythm, softer, slower, more human. The scrape of pigment against plaster. The whisper of a brush. Somewhere in the cool shadow of a temple courtyard, a Maya painter kneels before a wall, the color of bone, dipping his brush into red ochre. A streak of color blooms, deep and alive, then another, then another. This is how the Maya world was born, not once, but every day, through the steady work of its artists. To the Maya, beauty wasn't decoration, it was order made visible. Every pattern, every color, every curve had a purpose. The artisans who carved, painted, and built weren't laborers. They were interpreters of divine geometry. Their craft was an extension of worship, their art a continuation of prayer. Walk through a Maya city in your mind. The temples gleam with fresh lime plaster, bright as snow under the sun. Walls painted in red, blue, and yellow, with gods and kings moving across them like scenes from living myth. Even the floors are adorned with mosaics of jade and shell, arranged with mathematical grace. Nothing is accidental. The builders worked without metal, but their hands were precise. They carved limestone with stone tools, polished it with sand, lifted it with ropes and faith. Every block was measured by sight, balanced by intuition. When a pyramid was finished, its outer layer was smooth as skin, white, glowing, nearly alive. At the edges of plazas, sculptors chiseled altars and statues, jaguars, serpents, gods with eyes that seemed to follow you. The faces are human and not human all at once, expressions halfway between serenity and power. Their symmetry feels impossible, as if the artist had not carved the stone, but freed something that was already waiting inside. Potters shaped the world in miniature. Their clay vessels told stories as vivid as murals. Scenes of kings seated on thrones, scribes writing under torchlight, musicians playing flutes beside jaguars. Some pots were made for everyday use. Others were offerings, placed in tombs so that the dead could eat and drink in the next world. The smoothness of the clay, the curve of each handle, the sheen of red slip, all spoke of a civilization that loved touch as much as vision. And then there were the weavers. They sat beneath open roofs, threads tied around their waists, the looms stretched between body and earth. Each pull of thread was a prayer, each pattern a language. Their textiles shimmered with meaning, diamonds for the stars, zigzags for lightning, spirals for breath. The cloth wrapped around a newborn or draped over a ruler's shoulders was the same, a symbol of continuity, of belonging to something larger than time. Even sound was an art. The Maya shaped flutes from bone, drums from hollowed wood, and whistles carved like birds. Their music didn't aim for melody, it aimed for atmosphere. A flute might imitate wind through trees, a drum might echo thunder. Together, they recreated the world's sounds, turning the plaza into a living landscape of rhythm and memory. Smell, too, was sacred. Incense burners shaped like gods filled the air with copal, thick, sweet, ancient. The scent drifted through temples, across courtyards, and over rooftops until the whole city seemed to breathe the same air. When a new building was completed, priests would anoint its walls with resin, feeding it so that it might awaken. The Maya believed that beauty held power because it reflected the order of the cosmos. A well-proportioned mask, a balanced pattern, a clean line of glyphs, all were signs that humanity still understood its place in the universe. Disorder wasn't just ugly, it was dangerous. It meant the gods were being forgotten, so when an artisan worked, he wasn't expressing himself. He was listening, translating divine harmony into form. A mistake wasn't a flaw in craft, it was a disturbance in faith, and yet perfection was never purely mathematical. The Maya understood that beauty also needed breath, small irregularities, intentional asymmetries, a crack that let the spirit in. Everywhere you sensed their restraint, their elegance. They never over-decorated, never wasted space. Even their most complex carvings flow with balance, no line without reason, no color without purpose. Their art feels quiet, disciplined, endlessly patient. Picture, for a moment, a young sculptor at work. He sits cross-legged before a block of limestone, the jungle humming around him. His hands move automatically, tracing the curve of a serpent's body, the edge of a god's smile. Sweat runs down his arms, mixes with dust, and turns to white streaks. When he stops to rest, he doesn't admire the image. He studies it like a priest studying omens. The stone must be right. The god must feel seen. Later, when the temple is finished, the people will gather for the dedication. They'll bring flowers, food, music. The air will fill with the smell of burning resin and crushed petals. The artisans will stand at the edges of the crowd, anonymous, watching as the priests bless the building they raised. No one says their names, but they don't need to. Their work speaks. And centuries later, when the jungle grows over it all, when the roofs collapse and the walls fade, their touch will remain. A curve, a symbol, a single perfect line of balance that refuses to die. Because beauty, for the Maya, was not meant to vanish. It was meant to wait. Part 17. The breath of faith, temples, rituals, and the sky. The city wakes slowly. The sky, a pale blue veil, stretched thin over the jungle. Mist curls between temple steps, catching the first light like smoke. The air feels thick, heavy with anticipation. It's the day of a great ceremony, one that ties heaven, earth, and underworld into a single breath. The Maya built their temples not just as places of worship, but as living instruments of alignment. Each structure was a compass, a clock, and a prayer. When you stand at the top, wine brushing your face, you can feel the geometry beneath your feet, the way every stair, every angle has been tuned to the pulse of the sky. Priests climb the steps barefoot, their white robes billowing in the rising heat. Each carries an offering, incense, jade, feathers, or bowls of food. At the summit, they arrange everything with exact care, facing east to greet the sun. The crowd below waits silently. No one speaks. Even the birds seem to hold their breath. Then, as the first golden edge of the sun appears over the horizon, the conch shells sound, a low, trembling note, ancient, raw, and almost human. The ceremony begins. The priests raise their hands, smoke curls upward, and the city exhales. The sound of drums echoes through the plaza, deep and steady, like the world's own heartbeat. The smell of burning copal thickens the air. Every sense is saturated: sight, sound, smell, touch, faith. To the Maya, ritual was not performance, it was maintenance. Without it, the gods could grow tired, the sun might hesitate to rise, the rains might forget their path. These ceremonies weren't acts of superstition, they were acts of continuity. Every offering, every chant, every cut of a blade was a way of reminding the cosmos that it was still loved. Their pantheon was vast, a mirror of life itself. There was Chake, the rain god with his lightning axe; Itzamna, the creator, wise and old as light; Ixchel, the goddess of weaving, medicine, and the moon; Kyax, the protector of the wilds; Puch, lord of death and transformation. None were perfect, and that was the point. Divinity, like humanity, was a balance of strength and flaw. The rituals varied, some loud, some intimate. A farmer might whisper a prayer to Chak as he plants maize, sprinkling the first seeds with water drawn from a sacred cenote. A healer might offer flowers to Ixchel before tending to a fever. A family might burn incense in front of a small household altar, thanking the gods for rain or food. But when the great festivals came, the entire city became a temple. The plazas filled with dancers painted like jaguars and birds, their movements a retelling of creation itself. Children scattered flower petals underfoot. Musicians played drums, rattles, and flutes until the rhythm seemed to pull the world into motion. The people didn't watch the ritual, they became it. At the center stood the king, dressed as a god. His headdress rose higher than his own height, feathers trembling in the wind. His face was painted blue and red, sky and blood, heaven and earth. When he raised his arms, the crowd bowed. He wasn't a ruler at that moment, he was a conduit, a living bridge between divine and human. And above him, the heavens answered. The Maya watched the sky as one might watch a language. They saw the gods in motion, sun, moon, Venus, the Milky Way like a white serpent stretching across the night. The stars told them when to plant, when to pray, when to fight. Every celestial event was part of a conversation. An eclipse was not disaster, but dialogue, a sign that the gods were speaking in shadow instead of light. In the cities, observatories were sacred spaces, round, windowed towers built for stargazing. Priests tracked the planets from them with eerie accuracy. They knew the length of the solar year to within seconds, predicted solstices, and could tell when Venus would rise again after vanishing into the dawn. When it returned, they held celebrations that lasted for days: drums, smoke, dance, relief. At night, the temples came alive. Torches burned along the staircases. Incense trailed upward like glowing vines. From below, the silhouettes of the pyramids looked like mountains of fire. People sat quietly in the plazas, heads tilted back, watching the stars move between the temple peaks. You can almost feel it, that shared reverence, that sense of being small but necessary. They believed the gods had made the world in partnership with humans, and so it must be kept by partnership too. The divine was not somewhere else. It was woven through everything: breath, blood, light, stone. As the night deepens, the ceremony slows. The priests lower their arms. The drums fade. The firelight flickers along carvings of gods and serpents, turning them briefly alive. One last conch shell sounds, long and soft, a farewell, or perhaps a promise. The crowd disperses in silence. the stars settle. The city sleeps, but its faith does not. And tomorrow, when the sun climbs again, someone will grind maize, light incense, whisper a name, and start the cycle over. Because to the Maya, worship isn't something you do, it's something you breathe. Part 18. The underworld beneath their feet. The night is thick and endless. Crickets hum. The air smells of rain and limestone. A small group of torches flicker near a sinkhole in the jungle, a dark circular mouth in the earth, glistening with mist. The people gathered around it are silent. They are not afraid. They are respectful. They are standing at the edge of the underworld. To the Maya, death was never an ending. It was a descent, a journey into Xibalba, the place of fright. But fright is a misleading word. Xibalba was not a pit of punishment. It was a mirror world, an inverted reflection of life above. Every river, every hill, every star in the heavens had its counterpart below the soil. It was not a place to be feared, but to be understood. When someone died, the body was carefully washed, dressed, and wrapped. In its mouth, family members placed a single grain of maize, food for the journey. Sometimes a small jade bead rested on the tongue, symbolizing breath, the soul made visible. The dead were then buried under their homes, so that life continued above them. The living and the dead shared a single roof, separated only by layers of earth and memory. Xibalba lay deep beneath the surface, reached through caves and cenotes, the limestone wells that punctuate the Yucatan Peninsula like open eyes. These natural pools were sacred gateways, shimmering with turquoise light by day, black and bottomless by night. Priests descended into them carrying offerings, jade, obsidian, food, blood, sometimes even human lives. The water below was the underworld's skin, cool, still, eternal. Caves were the first temples, long before pyramids rose. When a priest stepped inside, torch in hand, the walls came alive. Shadows swayed and twisted, painting serpents, gods, and faces onto the stone. Drips echoed in the distance like the slow ticking of cosmic time. It was said that the breath of the gods still moved through these caverns. You could hear it if you listened long enough. The journey through Xibalba was described in their stories with both humor and awe. In the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of creation, the hero twins descend into the underworld to challenge its lords. They face tests of darkness, tests of fire, tests of knives. They die. They are reborn. They outwit death itself and rise again as the sun and moon. This wasn't just myth. It was a map of belief. To die in the Maya world was to play your part in the great story of renewal. The soul traveled through Xibalba, faced trials, learned endurance, and finally emerged transformed, ready to become rain, corn, starlight, or ancestor. Death was a process, not a door. Even the gods went there. Chak, the rain god, descended into Xibalba to draw water from its caverns. The maize god, too, was said to be buried there each year, only to sprout again when the rains returned. Every ear of corn, every birth, was proof that death had done its work properly. Rituals for the dead reflected this faith. Families lit fires and spoke the names of ancestors, believing the smoke carried their words downward. During feasts, a small portion of food was placed aside, not for the hungry, but for the remembered. The dead were not ghosts, they were neighbors. There was no hell here, no eternity of punishment, only motion, descent, learning, return. The underworld was not evil, it was necessary. You couldn't have rain without Xibalba's rivers. You couldn't have sunrise without its darkness. The gods themselves depended on that balance. Imagine walking through a sacred cave. The torchlight flickers, painting the ceiling with trembling light. The air is cool, damp, ancient. On the walls, red handprints mark the presence of the living, offerings to those below. Some of the prints are small, made by children centuries ago. Others are smudged, distorted by time, as if the hands that made them are still trying to reach upward. Deeper in the cave, you find offerings, bowls filled with ash, fragments of jade, the bones of birds, the skull of a deer. Nothing here feels grim. It feels intimate. The underworld is not silent. It whispers, it listens, it breathes. The Maya didn't separate the sacred from the everyday. The same well that provided water for drinking was also a portal to Xibalba. The same cave where children played was where the gods once walked. Even the rain that fell from the sky was believed to have begun its journey underground, flowing through the veins of the world before rising to feed the clouds again. Death, then, was simply another change of direction, a turn in the same eternal loop. And in that belief lies the Maya's greatest comfort, the knowledge that nothing truly ends. The maize that feeds the child today was once the flesh of ancestors. The water that fills the cenote once passed through their veins. The stars that light the sky are their memories, burning forever above the forest. Some nights, when the air is still and the jungle quiet, it's said you can hear them. Faint laughter echoing from the caves, like the rustle of wind through leaves. Not haunting, not mournful, just familiar. Because to the Maya, the dead are never gone. They've simply gone ahead to keep the fire burning. Part 19, The Cities in Bloom. It is morning in the classic age, somewhere around the year 700. The jungle is awake before the people are. Parrots shriek in the trees, monkeys argue across the canopy, and the first pale light spills across the limestone temples like water. The Maya world is at its peak. The air itself feels proud. Across the lowlands and highlands, hundreds of cities breathe in unison: Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, Copan, Caracol, Uxmal. Some are vast, others modest, but all share a rhythm, a sense of harmony. Smoke from breakfast fires rises from 1,000 courtyards, curling toward the same blue sky. From above, you would see something extraordinary. The jungle is not empty green. It is dotted with geometry, pyramids, plazas, causeways, reservoirs, fields. The Maya have transformed the landscape into a living clock. Every city is part of a pattern, every pattern part of a system that hums like a heartbeat too deep to hear. In the heart of these cities, the plazas fill with life. Farmers arrive from villages carrying baskets of maize and beans. Merchants set up stalls of obsidian blades, jade beads, feathers, and salt. Children chase dogs between the legs of priests. The smell of cacao and roasted corn hangs in the air, sweet and warm. This is not a primitive world. It is urban, elegant, organized. Water flows through canals and into reservoirs engineered with precision. Fields are terraced to catch every drop of rain. Astronomers calculate the solstice by watching light pass through temple doorways. Roads gleam white and straight under the midday sun. In Palenque, the temples rise like poems, their carvings delicate and lyrical. In Copan, the stairways are covered with hieroglyphs, entire histories written in stone. In Uxmal, the pyramid of the magician towers over the plain, its curves almost human. Each city has its own style, its own voice. Tikal's architecture is monumental, towers like spears, plazas wide as seas. Palenque feels more intimate, full of courtyards and shadow. Copan is intellectual, carved with words and numbers. Caracol is pragmatic, built for endurance. Together, they form a civilization that sings in harmony while arguing constantly under its breath. Art and science are everywhere. Potters fire intricate vases depicting gods and kings. Weavers turn cotton into fabric so fine it feels like breath. Scribes paint books on folded bark paper, recording rituals, births, eclipses, wars. Musicians tune drums and flutes for festivals. Painters climb scaffolds to refresh murals. Scenes of gods emerging from serpents, of kings lifting bowls of blood, of stars falling like rain. Every act, no matter how small, feels eternal. When a woman grinds maize, she echoes the creation of the world. When a craftsman smooths plaster on a wall, he honors the gods who built the sky. When a priest reads the movement of Venus, he aligns himself with the heart of time. The Maya have mastered their world without conquering it. They do not seek to dominate nature, but to converse with it. The forest is a partner, not a resource. They burn small plots, plant carefully, rotate fields. They know the songs that call the rain, the herbs that heal, the signs that warn of drought. Even the animals seem part of their rhythm. Jaguars slipping through the temples at night, parrots nesting in roof combs, frogs croaking in the reservoirs after storms. At night, the cities shine. Torches flicker in courtyards. Drums pulse softly from distant plazas. The air smells of smoke, honey, and sweat. Lovers walk along the white roads, their feet glowing faintly under the moonlight. On the highest temple, priests burn incense and speak to the stars in a language as old as silence. There is peace for now. Trade flows. Fields are full. The gods are fed. Even war, when it comes, feels orderly, fought on appointed days, sanctified by ritual, contained by custom. You can almost believe it will last forever. And maybe that's the tragedy, that perfection always mistakes itself for permanence. Beneath the canopy, roots are already creeping into cracks. Reservoirs are beginning to silt. The forests near the cities grow thinner each year. A generation from now, the balance will begin to falter. But no one standing here, bathed in sunlight and smoke, could imagine such a thing. For now, the Maya world is alive, glorious, mathematical, fragrant, human, a civilization in full bloom, breathing as one. Part 20. The Shadows of Drought. The air has changed. It's subtle at first, a dryness in the wind, a crispness in the leaves. The morning mist that once wrapped the temples now lifts too quickly. The songs of frogs fade from the reservoirs. Farmers watch the horizon and wait for the clouds that never come. The gods, it seems, have gone quiet. At first, no one panics. Droughts are old companions. The priests light more incense, the farmers whisper longer prayers, and the people keep faith in the rhythm of the world. But the rain does not listen. Weeks stretch into months. Rivers shrink into thread-thin streams, their banks cracking like pottery left too long in the sun. The reservoirs still gleam white with limestone, but the water inside is lower, and the mud at the bottom smells of rot. Crops wither, roots brittle and pale. The once green maize fields stand yellow and brittle, hissing in the wind. In the cities, the air grows heavier, hotter. The plaster on walls begins to flake. The lime dust that once smelled of creation now smells of exhaustion. People carry jars farther and farther each day, following trails down into the forest, searching for springs that haven't yet gone to dust. The priests climb the temples again. They know the people are watching. They burn more copal, raise more chants, draw more blood. Some whisper that the gods have turned away, that the world has drifted out of balance. Others insist the gods are testing them. Either way, the ceremonies grow louder, longer, more desperate. At night, the drums echo through the darkness, not for celebration, but for pleading. The sound travels far into the jungle, trembling like a heartbeat that knows it is failing. In small villages, famine begins its quiet work. Families eat what they can, roots, insects, bark. They move closer to the cities, hoping for food, for answers, for miracles. The roads once used by traders are now crowded with the hungry. The cities, already strained, swell and strain further. Tikal, Kalakmul, Palanque, all the great names, feel the weight of thirst. Reservoirs are dug deeper, canals widened. Farmers carve terraces higher into the hills, praying that the next rain will find them. The priests read the stars for signs, but the sky itself seems tired, the stars too steady, the constellations too indifferent. For the Maya, drought isn't just weather, it's failure of relationship. The world has always been a conversation between humans and gods, but now it feels one-sided. Prayers vanish into silence. When the rains finally do come, they fall too hard. The parched ground can't drink. It floods. Crops drown. The cycle that once nourished them becomes erratic, unpredictable. Inside the temples, the walls darken with smoke. The priests are thinner now, their faces drawn. Still they cut their flesh and offer blood, the ancient promise repeated again and again. We give, so you may give. But the balance is shifting, and even the gods seem bound by something larger than devotion. Civilization begins to crack quietly, like dry clay. Caravans slow, roads crumble, farmers abandon fields, cities lose their breath. The stelae, those proud monuments of kings and calendars, become neglected, their paint fading, their glyphs chipped by wind and time. And yet, even now, there is no chaos. Not yet. People keep their rituals. Mothers still grind maize, even if there is little left to grind. Children still chase each other through dusty courtyards, their laughter thin but stubborn. The Maya spirit, patient, cyclical, believing, holds on longer than the earth itself. But something else begins to grow in the silence, doubt. It creeps like the roots of strangler figs, unseen until too late. The farmers whisper that the kings have lost favor. The nobles whisper that the priests have failed. The priests whisper that the gods are angry. And beneath it all, a single unspoken thought hums. What if the rhythm is broken? By night, the jungle closes in, vines pressing against temples, roots splitting the stairs. The city lights flicker fewer and fewer each evening. The great plazas where thousands once gathered now stand half empty, the air filled only with the sound of insects and memory. Somewhere, deep in the darkness, a priest kneels before a dying fire, the last embers glowing weakly. His hands are stained red with ritual, his eyes fixed on the sky. He whispers one more prayer, not for power, not for glory, just for balance to return. A single drop of blood falls into the ashes, and for a moment the smoke rises again. But the rain does not come. Not yet. Part 21. Collapse in slow motion. At first no one calls it collapse. The world doesn't end with a scream. It sighs. The drums quiet. The fires dim. The smoke of incense curls upward and finds no wind to carry it. The Maya world, once alive with movement, begins to still. It happens unevenly, like the fading of a great song, one instrument at a time. In some cities, the plazas grow quiet. In others, the temples fall out of use, markets shrink. The white roads that once pulsed with trade fade back into the forest. A few traders still walk them, but their feet kick up dust where once there was rhythm. The droughts have come and gone in waves, but the rains, when they return, no longer follow the old calendar. Crops fail unpredictably. Famine whispers its name in every household. The people are patient, as they've always been. They plant again, pray again, rebuild again. But each year, the ceremonies grow smaller. The gods, perhaps, are listening, but they seem to have nothing to say. Power shifts like sand. Once great cities lose their gravity. Tikal's plazas empty. Calakmul's temples are swallowed by vines. Palenque fades into quiet ruins, its carved stairways slick with moss. Nobles and priests cling to their rituals, but the people begin to drift away, to smaller villages, to higher ground, to anywhere the soil still holds moisture. The great roads fall silent. The white limestone cracks and vanishes under creeping roots. Birds nest in roof combs. Jaguars prowl through once holy courtyards. The jungle, patient as ever, begins to take back what was borrowed. Yet the end is not a single moment. It's 1,000 small decisions, made one after another. A family leaves a farm that no longer yields. A craftsman sets down his chisel. A priest forgets the last date of Venus. A ruler looks out over his empty plaza and wonders whether the gods have already left. In some cities, desperation breeds new rituals. Temples are built smaller, faster, with less care. Offerings grow stranger. Bones are buried under doorways. The people cling to the only truth they've ever known, that balance can be restored through faith and blood. But even faith needs food, and both are running out. What once bound them together, trade, ritual, the calendar, begins to unravel. The calendar still turns, but no one is left to record it. The scribes have fled or starved. The codices rot in damp rooms. The glyphs on the stele fade under the rain. History itself starts to dissolve, like paint in water. The jungle listens. It does not interfere. If you walked through the ruins then, you would still find life. A mother cooking what little maize she has, a child playing near a dried reservoir, a tired priest whispering prayers into the wind. Civilization doesn't end because people vanish. It ends because they stop building, because hope shifts into memory. The Maya never disappeared. They endured. Their descendants remained in the forests and highlands, still speaking the same language, still watching the same stars. They built smaller towns, humbler temples, simpler rituals, echoes of the grandeur that came before. But the great centers, Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, became skeletons of stone, their hearts quiet. Archaeologists would one day call it collapse, but that word is too sudden, too clean. The Maya world didn't collapse. It exhaled. It loosened its grip on its temples and let the jungle hold them instead. By the year 900, the classic cities were mostly empty. Vines wrapped around the stairways, roofs caved in, monkeys swung where kings once prayed. The sound of rain replaced the sound of drums. And yet, even as nature reclaimed the stones, the ideas, the calendars, the gods, the language of the stars, survived. In the villages that still dot the Yucatan today, farmers plant corn with the same rituals, whisper the same prayers, and mark the same sacred days. Civilization, it turns out, doesn't die. It hides, it waits, it changes shape, and carries on in the breath of those who remember. If you stand now at the top of a ruined pyramid, the jungle endless around you, you can still feel the pulse of that old world. Faint, but steady. The earth hums beneath your feet. The wind tastes of lime and smoke. The Maya never vanished. They simply learned to live without needing to be seen. Part 22. The echo that never ends. The jungle stands silent now, a cathedral of green. The air hums with the drone of insects and the sigh of wind through vines. What once was stone and sound and ceremony is now swallowed by leaves. And yet, listen long enough, and the silence begins to speak. You can still hear them. Not with your ears, but somewhere deeper. The faint rhythm of drums beneath the heartbeat of the earth. The whisper of ancient prayers in the rustle of branches. The echo of footsteps along roads long buried under moss. The Maya are still here, not as ghosts, but as continuity. Because the Maya world never truly ended. It simply shifted its weight, exhaled, and kept breathing in a quieter form. The descendants of those builders, those astronomers, those poets of stone, still live across the highlands and jungles of Central America, in Guatemala, in Belize, in Mexico, in Honduras. They still speak the languages of their ancestors, dozens of dialects spun from the same old tongue. They still plant maize with care, still honor the cycles of the moon, still feel the sky as a companion rather than a ceiling. When the rains come, they look upward with the same gratitude their ancestors did. When they weave, the same symbols appear, diamonds for stars, spirals for wind, zigzags for lightning. When they cook, the same smells fill the air, maize, smoke, honey, and heat. It's easy to stand in the ruins and think of endings, but the Maya did not build for eternity in the way we imagine it. They built for renewal, for rhythm, for memory. Their civilization was never meant to last. unchanged. It was meant to transform, just as the maize seed must die before it grows again. And so, their legacy remains not in the ruins, but in the pattern, in the way humans everywhere still measure time, still build, still believe that there's meaning in the movement of the heavens, in the way we keep looking for order in the stars, for beauty and symmetry, for comfort and repetition. You can trace their influence in every calendar that counts the year, in every building aligned to the sunrise, in every moment you feel awe at the vastness of the sky. The Maya lived in conversation with the cosmos, and that conversation never stopped. Walk among their temples today, and you'll see the jungle pressing close, the roots twisting through the stones, the sunlight cutting down through the leaves in golden shafts. The air is warm, fragrant, alive. It smells of both endings and beginnings, the same way it always did. If you listen closely, the ruins don't sound like death. They sound like breathing. You can almost imagine them still there. A scribe hunched over his glyphs, a woman weaving patterns by the fire, a priest lighting incense at dawn, a farmer whispering to the corn as rain begins to fall. Time has folded around them, but the rhythm remains. The Maya did not vanish into history. They became history's heartbeat. And so, if you ever find yourself in that jungle, standing where the trees open to reveal a temple rising through mist, take a breath. The air will taste faintly of lime, of smoke, of memory. You'll be breathing the same air they once did. You'll be standing inside their dream, and the dream, somehow, is still dreaming you back.